So hi, thanks for joining on Instagram Live this morning. I'm joining the one and only Rabbi Sherry Hirsch from American Jewish University. We are talking all things social media, and we are going to be baking challah together today. So we're just going to let the AJU team get us sorted. In the meantime, hi to everyone who's joining. I'll try to wave to all of you. And we'll be baking together and chatting in no time.
As everybody's filling in, I just have to say, it's so clear who's the professional journalist here and who's the rabbi. It couldn't be more obvious. I love Instagram. Nice to see you. We're so happy you're joining for challah baking with Jessica Abo. As we're letting everybody just fill in, I want to say, first of all, Shabbat Shalom. It is so nice to be done with this week, as every week feels a little bit like Groundhog's Day, and every day feels a little bit like Wednesday over and over again. So the fact that at the end of today is Friday, and that many of you will have a beautiful challah to show for it, and that we will have done it together in community. And while it's a little bit tricky with and sneaky with Zoom, it still has that magic of Shabbat. So first of all, I'm Rabbi Sherry Hirsch. I am delighted to be here to welcome Jessica Abo, and I'm even more delighted that you're continuing to join us, and that if you're new to B'Yachad, Spirited by AJU, this is our online platform that we developed in this time of this pandemic to really serve the community at large. Whether you live in Australia or England or Nebraska, we want to bring Jewish wisdom into your living room, or as in today's case, into your kitchen. And we want you to know that we are there for you. And while we may not be able to hold your hand, American Jewish University is here to give you the spiritual nourishment, the mental nourishment, and the education that you may crave even more than you do in even normal times, whatever that means. So again, B'Yachad, Spirited Together, we're glad you're filling the room. I'm with Jessica Abo, and we're gonna dive right in. Because we're gonna be baking challah this morning, and because we've got a number of steps to take for those of you that are new challah bakers and for those of you that are seasoned challah bakers, we're gonna bake and we're gonna talk. So I'm just going to start by way of introducing my fabulous host and co-host this morning, and then we'll get right into baking. So Jessica Abo is the true deal. She is what is the definition of a multi-hyphenate. She's an award-winning television journalist, and you could tell just even how she introduced herself. She's the author of Unfiltered, How to Be as Happy as You Look on Social Media, which was released in August 2018. And sold out on its first day. I personally have read the book, and it just speaks so powerfully to walking the walk and talking the talk. And we'll get more into that later. Fashion designer. I happen to own her tees and her sweatshirts, which you have to get an Unfiltered t-shirt and sweatshirt. She's, again, an award-winning producer with her own company, specifically working on combating cyberbullying. She's a passionate philanthropist, a Lion of Judah for those of you that are familiar with the Jewish Federation. She believes that no matter where we are in our careers, relationships, or level of activism, we are all a work in progress. I think God could not agree more, and I would say that God's also a work in progress. She has been recognized for her journalism and philanthropy work, including being named to the Global Jewish 100, the Jewish Week's 36 Under 36 list, and the Jewish People's Choice Awards, Voices of Influence Award. She is a Wildcat from my alma mater, which I don't get to own, but she's a Northwestern Wildcat where she received both her bachelor and her master's. She's a New Yorker at heart, but we got to win her over on our coast because she now lives in Los Angeles with her daughter and her husband. And by the way, this is your first child. So before we even begin, you just have to say, how's the baby?
She's so sweet. Thank you so much. And thank you for that beautiful intro. She is great. She just turned 2, and she loves to make challah more than I do. And she will be this master chef and baker by the time she's 2.5. And it took me close to 40 years to figure out the kitchen. So she'll tell you this morning that it's Shabbat, so we have to light candles later, and she gets to make challah with me, and she's the best. So thank you.
Mazel tov. So many of you are going to ask, why are we talking to a social media expert and baking challah? All those questions answered, but let me turn it over to Jess so that she can get us set up with our ingredients and get us going.
Okay, so first, what you're going to want is 1 cup of water, and your water should be lukewarm. So no matter how big of a batch you make, you can use this tip and trick that I love, which is use half boiling, half cold, and that will roughly get you to the warm-ish temperature that you need. If your water is too hot, you can kill the yeast, and if your water is too cold, it could cause your dough to take later to rise. So you just want it to be lukewarm, and then it will be good to go. Then you need 1 tablespoon of yeast for this recipe, and you will need 4 tablespoons of oil. And you will need, what I like to add, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. If you don't have it, not a problem. And 1 teaspoon of salt. You will also need 3.5 cups to 4 cups of flour, depending on the temperature. One of the crazy things about challah is you can make it the same way every single week, and your challah will come out differently, and that is solely based on the temperature of your environment. So that's bananas, because you're like, oh my God, I had all the ingredients, I did all the things, and my dough didn't rise. And it could just simply be the temperature of your home.
Which is such a truism about life, Jess, right? You could do the exact same thing and have totally different results, and it's things out of none of your control. So I love that you said that. Just had to put in that spiritual bite.
And all we can do is keep showing up. All we can do is keep showing up. You'll need 1 egg, which is for our dough, and then you need 1 additional egg with a teaspoon of water, which is for our egg wash, which is what we paint the challah with at the end. And then we are good. So that's 7 ingredients total, which plays such a big role in Judaism. And I'm going to run through really quickly, if it's okay with Rabbi Sherry, to just go through what Gila Andruzier, who runs the Chabad of North Irvine, shared with me a long time ago. And now as we do these challah bakes on Fridays, I like to just sort of rattle these things off, because each of the ingredients has a very cool representation, and they might mean something different to you from week to week. So the first one being water. Water is compared to the Torah. And just as water brings all the ingredients together and it prompts the yeast to rise, Torah unites all of us and prompts us to rise and come together. The yeast is all about growth and expansion. So maybe you're hoping your business grows this week. Maybe you're hoping you spiritually grow this week. Anything along those lines, that's what we can think about with the yeast. With sugar, we think of sweetness and joy. So we want to thank Hashem for all of the sweet things in our life. And also just think about the ways in which we can add more sweetness and joy to others. With eggs, you know, eggs in Judaism, whether it's Passover or other holidays, plays a big role in terms of thinking about life and the circle of life. So with the eggs, we want to think about having Hashem watch over us and our loved ones. And for those who wish to have children, are about to have a child, recently had a child, we just wish only good things for you and your little ones. With salt, purification and clarity. So with salt, we think of those who are in need of healing. When I make challah, I like to think of the people who are in need of blessings, those who are trying to have kids, all the way through those who are sick. And God knows that we are living in a time where a lot of people need healing. With oil, olive trees take a long time to mature. So just like the oil, we might take a long time to mature, or our business idea might take a long time to mature, or our level of Judaism and spirituality might take a long time to mature. So we just hope that our lives can be as fruitful as possible. And then last but not least, the flour holds all of the ingredients together, just like, you know, we have Hashem holding all of us together, Judaism, our community holding us all together, our friendships, our family, our love, our faith. So we just hope that we can only come together in strength and in good times.
Okay, if the journalism thing wasn't working out, I would tell you to become a rabbi, because I want to spend the next 45 minutes just talking about each one of those ingredients and what they mean. And that's not what we plan to do, so I may have to touch back on that. But again, there's a spot for you at the Ziegler Rabbinical School if this journalism thing that, you know, is really crazy successful just takes a turn, because that's such a beautiful message. It really is a beautiful message. So as you start to put the ingredients together, and I think you're going to do that in front of us, I just want to ask you a couple questions. You're a social media expert, and what you wrote about was you wanted to take away the stigma of social media and all the literally bad press that social media gets. And so I want to start by saying, first of all, why are we baking challah with you? We should be talking all things social media. So tell us about that.
So that's a great question. And just for those who are baking with me, all I've done now is take my 1 cup of lukewarm water. I added in my tablespoon of yeast and I added in my third of cup of sugar, and we're going to let that sit so the yeast can do its thing for about 10 minutes. So this is a great time for us to chat.
And by the way, if you have any questions, whether they're questions about ingredients or questions about spirituality, you feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them as we go along.
And with the yeast, one more thing, you want it to froth over, you want it to bubble a little bit. So you might just have to give it like one zhuzh with a fork or a whisk and then nothing. Okay.
And that's a technical term, the zhuzh?
Yep, zhuzh. It's in the recipe list ingredients. The scholars and sages have been using zhuzh for a long, long time.
Good. I just wanted to clarify because I missed it in my rabbinical school class, but good.
And, okay, so you hit the nail on the head. I am not a master baker. I have not been making challah for 30 years, nothing along those lines. Just this past Rosh Hashanah, I decided, Brett and I, when we get to the new year, we think of what is one extra layer of Judaism that we can be bringing into our lives, and we both choose something that is independent of the other. And for me, it was making challah. And I love the idea that you can go to mikvah and you can light candles, you can make challah, you can do all of these things to create a Jewish home. And we've taken on in our home candle lighting and mikvah, but challah was missing. And I just thought it'd be so nice to be the kind of person who every Shabbat could have a Shabbat table with my family, with challah being there. And I think for so many people, even if you do nothing connected to Judaism at all ever, there's something about eating challah that just brings out so much tradition and so many memories and so much connection to Judaism that made challah, the process of it has been very meaningful to me and something that I've loved sharing with other people. And thank you to all those who have been tasting mine along the way. Some weeks are better than others. Work in progress.
But I also think that's what I think. First of all, there's a lot that you just said there that I want to unpack for a moment. One, I have a belief as a rabbi, if you do one additional ritual per year, that if you live till 120, you will have added 120 rituals to your life. And I have a group of people doing it, and they've been doing it for about 20 plus years. And some of them went from never even lighting Shabbat candles to now doing Havdalah every week. So one a year is such a great modeling, and just add baking challah. But I think there's even something else that you said that I really want to unpack and have you unpack for us, Jessica, is you weren't a professional challah maker. And one of the things that I think you're trying to share with the world is that you don't have to look perfect on social media in the way that we curate it. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, there was the messaging of social media before COVID, and it is in transformation. We're looking at it differently. Tell me about that, but you may want to do a little more ingredients before you answer that question.
You are so good. We're still letting the yeast do its thing. So what I would say to that is, and also for those of you who are following along Instagram and are just joining, we are joining Rabbi Sherry Hirsch of AJU, American Jewish University. We are baking challah, talking about social media. Follow their Biachad platform. It's amazing. They're doing such incredible work. And if you don't have the ingredients together, you can follow along their YouTube channel later today. All of this will be posted.
Okay. And I just want to add, a lot of people are asking, can we post the ingredients and the amounts? We will be posting them momentarily. We are on it.
Awesome. Okay, great. So for me, I think if you look at January 2020 and compare it to May 2020, we all know we're living in a completely different world, but that's not necessarily true with social media. In January of 2020, we still were talking about the link between our psychology and technology, and how not to fall into the compare and despair trap, and how to stay happy, and how to stay in your own lane, and how to be the best version of your life that's unfiltered. We're still talking about all of that in May because the landscape has changed. Right now, we're saying to that mom who's barely hanging on, do not get caught up in the mom who's following a color-coded schedule and has crushed homeschool learning in a matter of a day. You do you, make sure your kids are happy, healthy, safe, and loved, and they will turn out just fine. And now, instead of saying, don't just scroll aimlessly while you're standing in line at Trader Joe's, because we're not at Trader Joe's anymore together, use this time to learn, to share, to be a little bit more unfiltered, and to put out that love and raw content that enables people to know that we're all in this together. Because truth be told, we're not all in the same boat. This time period looks very different for everyone. For some people, this is a time to learn a language, and for others, they might be in an unsafe environment. So we all might be experiencing this at the same time, and social media can be a wonderful place to be the person, if you're in a good spot, to share resources with those who might need an advocate right now, because school and work were their safe place, and now they don't have those environments. So this is a tool for us to learn, for sure, but for us to also share information to be able to help those that might be in need of our help.
A lot of people have asked about the ingredients. I just want to say, in your email, for those of you that registered, those of you that are not on Instagram or Facebook Live, you don't have the ingredients, but in your email, we have it. We are working on putting it up momentarily. But again, everybody, it's in your emails. I just want to say, there does seem to me to be a shift in the use of social media. Before, it was like a little bit of a bad word, and people curated the lives they wanted you to see. They curated how you wanted to be consumed, right? Blissfully married for 18 years, and I've been married for 20, and I can tell you, no one who's been married for 20 years would put blissfully married for 20 years. Marriage is a work in progress. It's a lot of work, right? I think there's a little bit of a transformation going on, that social media is becoming a way for people to communicate their humanity and their need to help others, and to share that we are all in this together, and this is painful. And maybe the goal is not to look perfect, but the goal is to look human, which I think is a very human and Jewish goal.
And I think if that is what comes out of this, that, and also just how hard it is for teachers to teach, for frontline workers to do their jobs, for the employees that are showing up day in and day out, for all of us to be fed, healthy, safe, what have you. I think connecting us from that humanity perspective is one piece, but then also giving us a moment to step back to realize what it actually is like for someone else to do his or her job. And it takes a minute for us to just say, okay, what we do is important, but it's not the only thing that exists in this world. And if we all showed each other a little bit more respect and support, it would really be a much more beautiful place. And that doesn't cost a thing. So yes, if you can be giving money to an organization that's on the verge of going under right now, that's amazing. But if you could also show some kindness and respect to the person who delivers your packages, I think that's just as important, if not more.
Beautiful. Tell me where we're at the baking process. People have questions.
Great. So now your yeast and your water and your sugar should have frothed over a little bit, which you will see in a foamy-like state. And I'm going to show, this is what it looks like. Okay, so we have a bit of a muddy water looking concoction. And then what I like to do is, in a separate bowl, I like to add my oil, my egg, my vanilla, and get that together. So we'll take that now. So we have one egg.
And egg, as you mentioned, is really symbolic in Judaism. At the Shiva, we eat eggs to remind us of the circle of life. At Pesach, we ate egg drop soup. The second thing you said is the oil.
The oil,
which glues us together like the mortar.
And then this is a little bit of vanilla, a quarter of a teaspoon of vanilla. And the other thing with the egg to do too is, you might have seen all of my things are in glass today, just for the ease of doing this with you. But I always put my egg in a glass regardless, because I check for blood spots, because if there's a blood spot in your egg is not kosher and we can't use it. I have also found that with brown organic eggs, you see a lot more blood spots than you do in white eggs. So just a little thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to just do a little mix with all of this, which is just the teaspoon of vanilla, the 4 tablespoons of oil, and the egg. And I am going to add that in to
it goes into what?
The brown water, which is 1 cup of lukewarm water with 1 tablespoon of yeast and 1/3 cup of sugar that we let sit for about 10 minutes. And your yeast, if you're using a little packet that's active rise or rapid rising, Red Star, those little packets sometimes take a little longer. So if you're looking at your water and it's sort of like flat and you're like, this is not doing anything, give it another 5 or 10 minutes and then you'll probably see it come to life. So I mix all of these together.
Jess,
Yep,
I have a couple questions from our audience. Roberta asked, my yeast is 3 little Fleischmann's packages. Is one of those a tablespoon?
So one of those is roughly under a tablespoon. So if you need 2 of those packets to get to 1 tablespoon flat, but I've had weeks where I've just used the packet for this one batch and it's completely fine because you're like just shy.
And I love this question. Are there vegan substitutes? I just have to say, I have 3 vegans in my house, very serious. They won't wear leather. They're religious, like really ritual and religious vegans in my house. And we use an egg substitute. Would that work? Or do you have other suggestions?
So I made an egg-free challah for the first time last week, and the recipe was great. I am happy to give that to Sherry too, to post when you post this list. I don't have that in front of me now, so I can't remember the exact proportions. I want to say that one just called for more oil and more water, but I am happy to follow up. I'm Jessica Abo TV on Instagram if you want to just send me a DM, or happy also to share this with Sherry so that they can post the eggless recipe. But I would imagine that an egg substitute would also be completely fine. But if someone really just feels like they want to steer clear of all things egg, there are definitely water challahs that are delicious and great.
And I just want to translate things for our audience. Michelle, Jessica, you are such a, not only do you speak fast like me, which I love, but also everybody tells us to slow down and I'm like, speed up. There's a sense of urgency of living in the world. We're not going to be here forever, especially now we're reminded of our mortality and our finitude. So I think what are we waiting for? So yes, we need to slow down and be present, but we also can continue to make impact in the world. But what I was going to say that I think is important to note is you said DM, and some of our audience members may not know what that is.
Sure. Direct message. So if you go on Instagram or Facebook, or if you even reach out to AJU, if you go to my website, which is jessicaabo.com, there's a contact section. You can send me an email that way. There are so many ways to get in touch with me. And if you feel the need while you're making challah ever to ask a question, nothing would give me more pleasure than being someone who could help you along the way, because I have emailed, texted, called, FaceTime many of people to be like, does my muddy water look muddy enough? Like, am I doing this right? So if I can be that person for someone else, by all means, get in touch.
So I think what's so compelling about you, Jess, is that you are just real. So I think it's fascinating that your life message is to translate that for people on a medium that is supposed to be not real, right? And so I think it's really impressive and also very, it makes me proud to know you as a friend, because you're like, okay, I don't know how to make challah. Learn something new during these 2.5 months or 3 months that we're alone. And like, let's just do it together. And I would ask you, what advice would you give people during this time that maybe don't feel as comfortable taking a risk or as exposing themselves? What advice would you give them?
So my advice would be, and first of all, thank you for all of that. That is really very kind of you to say. My advice would be, if you don't feel comfortable sharing that you're having a hard day, or that you feel lonely because maybe you're going through this with family and friends really far away, or maybe you have grandchildren who live really far away and you just miss your family, maybe you just lost your job. If you don't feel comfortable sharing all of those things, that's okay. But I would encourage you not to then overpost to compensate for that. So don't post that you just got the most amazing Amazon delivery, or that your life is amazing, or that you're, I don't know, like, just don't post the lie. Don't post. And if you are going to post and you feel a little bit more vulnerable, then maybe be willing to post when you burn your toast and just be like, current mood, and just show your burnt toast, because I think that's where people come together and that's where people can relate to one another. It's in those moments of vulnerability of, oh my gosh, me too. Like, I've had a hard day, or I can't do this for another 5 minutes, or I have a loved one who is sick and I can't be there with them, or I'm going through a loss and I am experiencing Shiva over Zoom. Like, we are going through such unprecedented times right now that if you're not comfortable sharing the hardship, that's okay. But I don't think you need to go to the other end of the extreme and post something that isn't true.
So let's keep baking.
Sure.
Or I should say, you should keep baking and I should keep watching.
Okay, so then the last element that we're going to put in is the salt. So we just sprinkle that in. And then it's time for us to add in our flour. So with the flour, you don't really want to just dump all 4 cups or 3.5 to 4 cups all in at the same time. I typically like to go a half a cup at a time, but I don't want us to have to move too slowly today. So I'm just, for the purpose of our demonstration, I'm going to add 1 cup of flour at a time. And this is not based on science or expertise whatsoever. But what I have found is if you mix your challah at this stage of the game, which is like this, your concoction, with a whisk, I like to keep my dough like this, as liquidy as possible for the first few cups of flour. I find that it then enables the dough to work a lot easier in the kneading process. So I just whisk this with my Mickey Mouse whisk, because this is what you do when you bake with a 2-year-old. You make it as fun as possible from every perspective imaginable.
Do you have to be a 2-year-old? I like the Mickey Mouse whisk without being 2.
No, but I totally know what I'm sending you when we're done with this call. So no to that. And now you can see that this is number 2. So once you add the 3rd cup, it is typically too hard to mix with a whisk. And that's when you can start adding a little bit more flour so it gets a little bit tougher. And then you can do the last little bit of flour with your hands to start kneading. So
Jessica, would you just, we want to just make sure we're right before kneading. Can you kind of just go over everything that's been added? Are we all ingredients in? Give us just a summary of this first stage.
Yep. Okay. So this is what we're working with. We started with 1 cup of water that was lukewarm, the kind of warmth that you would have put a baby in to give it a bath. I typically like to use half of a boiling cup of water with a half a cold cup of water, and give or take maybe some room temperature water to even it out. So we put that in your bowl first. Then you add 1 tablespoon of yeast with a 1/3 cup of sugar. You give it 1 zhuzh and you let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes. It should bubble a little bit. It should froth. It should expand in size, because that's what the yeast is doing. Proofing, it's activating. So after your yeast looks like it's ready for you to go on to the next stage, you're going to add in, which while it was proofing and doing all of those things, we gathered our egg, our 4 tablespoons of oil, and a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. You're going to add all of those things to your bowl. Then 1/4 teaspoon of salt goes in the bowl, and then we start 1 cup at a time of flour. So now you are joining us while we are on, I'm either on cup 2 or 3, I can't remember, I think I'm on 3. And the dough itself is going to get a little tougher. So with a whisk now would be a little tough, but I'm going to make mine's a little liquidy today. It's a little warm in here because I turned our air conditioning off so it wouldn't be too noisy. And with kneading, the trick with kneading is you don't want to over knead, because if you over knead, that is what can make your challah be really dense. And by dense, it just means like it's not soft and light and fluffy. So one of the tricks to know that your challah is going to be like just where it should be is once you've baked it and you take it out of the oven, if you flip it over and you tap it, it should feel a bit hollow, and then you know you're good to go. But if you tap it and it's like hard as a rock, or you can use it as a weight like my challah was last Friday, legit, like did not need to work out. I just needed to go like this with my challahs. They were so dense because I over kneaded. You're in good shape. So I want to show you now. I don't go in crazy. I sort of make a princess, wave, kind of like a Barbie doll hand. And I just work the dough in so that it gets a little thicker. And
do you raise it up a little bit? Perfect.
So I like to get it all over and just keeps kind of scooping it. Now I'm only doing this with 1 hand now, so it's a little tricky, but I like to scoop it under. That's how I was taught to do it. And you might just need to pat it, but you can notice I'm not punching it and I'm not squeezing it. I'm just patting it and just sort of getting it to a place where it is going to be spongy, because you want your dough to be spongy. So I need more flour for mine today. So I'm just going to add the rest of mine. So that mine, I had 4 cups in there today. And I'm just going to do this with 2 hands just for a second so then you can see what I mean. But I flatten it and then I flip it, and I flatten it and I flip it. And I try to
Can you lift it up a little bit? I know it's hard.
No problem. So I flatten it and let's see if I can do it that way. And I flip it and I flatten it and I flip it. And you can see it's a little piecey. Sometimes people make the mistake of trying to get all the little pieces in at the end, but you don't want to do that because those little pieces that you are working with along the way that kind of get caught up in the flour, those can actually make your challah have little dry spots. So you just want to let those go when you get to a certain spot. So I'm just going to keep kneading mine.
Can you use a stand mixer? I just got that question.
Yeah, you can use a mixer. I've never done that because I'm not that fancy or talented. So, you know, I haven't gotten there yet. But you can see my challah now is in a ball. And this is good. This is very, very good. Now, what I typically do at this stage of the game is I don't over flour at all. Even if it was a little sticky at this moment, what I do, and has been very helpful, is I put a little oil in a plastic bag and I stick my challah in this plastic bag and I let my challah rise in this for an hour. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It could be a little sticky. And I say, good riddance, I'll deal with it in an hour. And that's exactly what we do. So now your challah would look like this. Now some people prefer to keep their challah in the bowl that they've been working in, and then they like to put saran wrap over the bowl and a warm towel. That is also a perfectly good way to let your dough rise. I just happen to put it in a bag because sometimes on a good week when my challah dough is really, really like excited, it could bubble over the bowl and then make a mess. So just to sort of prevent that from happening, I have found that when it's in a bag like this, it will fill up the whole bag. So you'll know your dough is in a place when it doubles its size. But this dough in an hour will reach all the way over here. And then I know I'm okay. So I also like it because the oil is in this. So I like to mix the oil in it a little bit too. And after an hour, some people like to punch theirs down somewhere in the middle, flip it over. You can do that too. I sometimes run an errand, so I'm not here to do that. And I don't find it makes a difference. So we're gonna let this sit for an hour. What it would look like when it's done is something like this. That's like spongy, that if you put your finger in it, it would bounce back at you. So that's what we're going for. It's like almost like a pizza pie dough that when you move it from side to side, it's very soft. You can like do all these things with it and it moves with you, but doesn't stick to your other hand. If it does stick to your other hand, just add a little bit more flour. Some people like to add a little bit more oil so that this way you're not adding too much flour.
Can you put it, Jess, I'm gonna interrupt you for a few minutes. Can you put the dough in a warming drawer?
You can put it in a warming drawer, but then make sure that you're home because if you put it in a warming drawer, or let's say that you've been cooking and you put it on your stove, that's going to make it rise faster. So that's a great that's a great tip if you are short on time. But if you don't want it to over rise, because then you risk it becoming a little bit more like sourdough than you want it to, because it will have a bit of a sour taste if it's risen too much.
I am so glad you brought up the sourdough craze that is going on, which I think putting your hands in the dough, and even watching how you're doing it right now, there's something very primal about that. Getting your hands dirty and not being, you know, getting your hands into it. And I think we're so far away from that now. And I think what's interesting is there's been a resurgence of making bread for Jews, especially in the area of challah, but for the world, sourdough. People are obsessed with sourdough and they're making it left and right. And I think I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think it's speaking to for people.
Well, I think for some people, it's a lot cheaper to make their own bread at home. Like something like this, you know, a pound of flour costs roughly $5, a dozen eggs, oil. I use canola, but you could use vegetable, avocado, lots of different kind of natural oils that you can use out there. So for some, I actually think making bread at this current time is just a reflection of people wanting to be sensitive about how they're spending their money. When it comes to community, I think that there's something very special. You have to understand, I never was a cook. I never was that person that people were like, we're inviting Jessica Abo over to our party because we want her to bring her cookies. I aspired to be that person, but I lived on yogurt and string cheese and salads and sushi because I was getting up for most of my life at 2 a.m, to go into the newsroom. And the last thing I felt like doing when I got home from a shift was cooking. So I have now learned how wonderful it is to share your final product with other people, specifically challah, because it's kind of like pizza. There's like really just no bad challah unless it's totally inedible. But even if you make it you didn't like make it a 10 out of 10 this week, if you share it with someone else, it just elevates that person and you. So I think for why people are choosing to make challah, I think it's just one of those things that makes us all feel a little bit more Jewish and a little bit more connected. And when we get to share that with other people, it's very, very special.
And I was going to say, if you have thoughts about why you're making challah this morning and why you're joining in, feel free to put them in the Q&A to share it with everyone, because I do think there is a profound connection in getting your hands together dirty, doing it in a really unperfectionistic way. I think specifically for women, where we're asked to be so strong so often and to really constantly be multitasking. What you just said, I think, is so profound. So feel free to put that in the Q&A. I want to remind everybody we're Biyachad together. We're also on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, where we're making challah with Jessica Abo, spirited by American Jewish University, where if you also want to get your hands dirty, look towards next week's offerings from our art department. We have drink and draw, by the way. You can drink and draw. I don't care what you drink. Just come after Shabbat and do some drawing with us. You can also make trash into treasure with your family, which is a great family activity. So make sure to go to our website to see all those incredible offerings. So now we are at the halachic, or what I would say the Jewish law part that makes challah different than sourdough, correct? We're now going to be, before we braid, we're going to talk about the blessing and taking challah. So take us through that.
Sure. So the part of actual challah making, the challah itself is the piece that we take off, which I recently learned in one of these challah bakes that we're doing every week. And I did not know that when you had your ball of dough like this, that unless you have made 3 pounds, 11 ounces, your ball of dough it's not eligible for the little piece with a blessing. So you did not say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu v'tzivanu l'chafresh challah. You don't
which means, blessed are you, O Lord our God, who has commanded me lahafrish, to take apart a piece of the challah and to dedicate it for the priest.
For the Kohanim, exactly. So the part about that I think is important is Judaism is one of these beautiful opportunities, I think, to encourage us to do more, to let us graduate to do more over time, but doesn't want to take away what you have already done. So if you have made a single batch today, like I have, and you have all these people you're praying for and things that you're praying for yourself, or you want to give thanks, you can still take a piece off and just set it to the side. You just would not, and it's about the shape of an egg. If it's a big batch, and a little smaller if it's a smaller batch, but you can set it to the side and you wrap it in foil and you burn it in your oven. You don't put it with the rest of your challah. You just, while you're baking your challah, it's off to the side and it's burning, and that's to represent the piece that would go to the Kohanim, to the holy priests. So I like to think that Judaism also was thinking about everyone in this moment and said, if it's a single batch, that's not really enough to share unless you're making little rolls or 2 small challahs. So let's require it to be a very big batch to ensure that you either freeze for next week and you have challah next Shabbat, or that you share with those who might not have it this week. So,
and I just want to remind people, we don't, at American Jewish University, we aren't denominational, we're not membership based at the moment. And so I want to remind, not at the moment, we're not membership based. So we embrace thoughtful discussion around all kinds of observance, all kinds of ways of expressing your Judaism and learning in your Judaism and from your Judaism. So, you have 3.5 pounds, yay or nay, we want you to understand this is the tradition, but the tradition is interpreted by you in your home, and the greatest keepers of tradition is the home. So there's a question about there's no kneading involved. you just knit, didn't you? Is there a past tense of kneading?
So yeah, it's such a good question. I'm not quite sure. And just to piggyback off of that, I really do agree with you, because I think the fact that someone would go through all the trouble to get these ingredients to make challah is such a beautiful mitzvah in and of itself. That, you know, when I learned that, I was like a little disheartened, because I was like, but I've been doing this way for like, since I started making challah in October, you know? So you're right about the interpretation and people doing whatever feels meaningful to them, because every mitzvah counts, no matter what kind of mitzvah it is.
And what's a mitzvah?
A good deed, an act of loving kindness.
Well, and an act of doing something to elevate the world and to elevate your standing in the world, right? To bring holiness into the world.
And also something that people might want to think in mind, it's the most beautiful gift that you can give someone who is no longer here, because after someone has passed away, they are in a better world, some might say, but the ability to do mitzvahs is really something we get to do in the physical world here. So in your act of loving kindness, you can actually elevate someone's soul in their memory. So I often think of, when I make challah, the people who aren't here, that their neshamas, that their souls should be elevated, and they should be still accruing good credit.
So wait, so the kneading, you were going to answer.
Sorry. So the kneading I was going to answer, I did knead. I was kneading when I was flipping, and I was going like this, and I was scooping the dough, and I was flattening and flipping. I just don't punch, and I don't squeeze. So, and I don't like, you know, twist like this, because that's what risks you having a very dense challah. So the whole goal to think about it the entire time is you want your challah, and even the dough itself, like the dough that I was playing with here, it's very light. So it's kind of crazy that you would have this big batch and you could still go like this, you know, from side to side. But that's really what you are able to do when challah is not over kneaded.
One other question: before you lahafrish challah, before you take the challah, do you add raisins or chocolate chips, or do you do it after?
So I learned this in one of the challah bakes, actually. So when you would do that is when you start to braid your challah. I like to pull off 3 big chunks. I am not.
Oh, are you going to show us how to do that?
Yep. So I won't show you how to add chocolate chips or anything, but how I learned to do it, because I would have thought you just sort of dump them in and then keep mixing, and then you pull your pieces and braid. Turns out when you're adding olives or chocolate chips or something like that, what you do is you first get your 3 chunks together if you're doing a 3-stranded braid like we will. And what you do is you flatten your dough like this, and you put the chocolate chips inside, and then you fold your braid back over and you braid like that. So they're tucked in, and that ensures that when you have a challah, that the chips are all throughout the challah, opposed to what my challah probably would have looked like had I just thrown the bag in my bowl, which would have just been all of your chocolate chips would have landed in like one section, and then the rest would have been a plain challah. So if you're adding in something to make it fancy, flatten out your strand, put whatever you want to put inside, roll it back up so it's tucked away, and then start to braid.
So because we are running out of time and I want to be mindful, let's start to braid. And we did our bracha. We took our lahafrish challah, where we set it aside for the priest. We wrapped it in foil. We put it in the oven and we burned it. Again, it doesn't matter if you've made 3.5 pounds or if you've made 5 ounces. We're just glad you're baking challah with us at Biyachad, spirited by AJU. So you've got your 3 strands. Take us through, Jess.
Okay, so what I find very challenging, because I don't have a camera over my head, is trying to braid while someone else is doing it on a table and a Zoom camera is just facing down on me. So I don't know if we're going to be successful in doing this today, but this is the whole point of braiding. You take the outside strand, doesn't matter right or left, doesn't matter which one, and this goes over the middle. Okay, so now you have one, and then you take the other outside and you put that over the middle, and you just keep going right middle, left middle.
Do you know what? Right. I've always messed this up. Is I thought when I first started making challah, which I don't make well, and actually my nanny makes beautifully, my Catholic nanny. But when I started, I thought I braided it like you braid your hair, which is that you rotate. It's actually the opposite. It's always outside, outside, in, outside, outside, in, right? Outside, in, outside, in.
Out, that's right. Right, middle, left, middle, right, middle, left, middle. So I've never done that. And I feel like we somehow made it work enough. But the other fun thing that I love that someone taught me is you take the ends and then you tuck them under. So feasibly, this would have been on a tray. But then when they're tucked under, you don't see like the messy end part, which I think is, here, I'm gonna show you now on my tray.
Can I add a little drosh to that? When you don't see the end, it kind of lets you know that there is no end, right? That there's just, it's a continuous braid of weaving people together day in and day out. And that's what we do as Jews. And that's what we do for all people. So I love that.
Well, I love that addition. This, you can see, because we kind of, here, just like, there we go. Now, this Challah like has like a tush. But, okay. So
wait, I just want to say, I can't state this enough, that you make everything seem accessible. Like, we've had other challah makers and I've watched in awe as they've made this like beautiful challah and literally was like, but I can never do that. I think what's so powerful about your messaging is like, this one has a tush, this one's a little sticky, this one's not. Just dive in. And it's such a powerful message for people, especially at a time when we really have a moment to be introspective and think about, what is it that I want to dive into? So tell me, now do you bake it? Tell me the rest of the process.
So the last piece now is, again, if you are doing an egg-free challah, you would not do this part. But for the purpose of today's recipe, I add a teaspoon of water with 1 full egg. People do this all kinds of ways. People, if you Googled egg wash challah, you would see lots of different like formulas for this. I have found for me to get a really golden look that 1 full egg, 1 teaspoon of water does the trick. You dip your paintbrush in, and if you did not have a paintbrush when you are making challah, like I did not when I first started, I just took like a plastic glove, which is usually how I need and do everything, especially when I know I'm going to be sharing my challahs with other people. I have gloves on the whole time. But I just put the egg, on my hand and I would smear it because, again, got to get the egg wash on the challah somehow. So you paint it just like you would be painting anything else. You just paint a light setting. Okay. I'll have to call my mom back. Okay.
Because it's Friday and it's Shabbat and everybody should call their mom or their loved ones and let them know and wish them a Shabbat Shalom.
She's probably delivering her challahs as we speak. Okay, so you paint this. And then what I did not know when I started, but makes all the difference in the world, is after you've painted your first round of challah, we put this to the side and we let it rise again. This was like mind-blowing to me because I couldn't figure out why my challah wasn't really working in the beginning. And someone said, well, you're letting it rise twice. And I was like, rise twice? Like no one even told me about that. So, so we let it rise twice. But recently in one of our weekly challah Instagram live Zoom things, baker Ariella Goldman taught me that if you then do the egg wash 1 more time and then put it in the oven, that's when it really gets that like golden brown aesthetic that you see in the stores.
So that's, we asked, is it letting the dough rise just once? And you just clarified it's letting the dough rise twice. And you also clarified that it's the egg wash, let it rise again, and egg wash if you want that special. And I'm going to ask you later to put all these different challah bakes that you're hearing about. I'm going to ask you to email them to us, and we'll email them to registrants all over because a lot of people are asking about it. One other question, technical. Can you use bread flour? Is it the same amount of flour?
So it is the same amount of flour, and some people, so these weekly challah bakes that we're doing, I'm having a different person teach me how to make challah every week. And the one that we did with my sister last week, she swears by bread flour. She believes that bread flour makes your challah taste 1 billion times better. There have been weeks I couldn't find bread flour, or I've forgotten I was low on flour and I only had all purpose. And I have still found that my challah came out perfect. But there are some people who just feel like bread flour is 1000% the way to go.
And cookie sheet or a pan with sides?
So I can grab what I use. I either have those disposable tins that have sides that are a little rectangle, because I find that once you do this on a cookie sheet, it can sometimes lose its shape a little bit. So I find that when it's in a, like pretend like this was an aluminum tin and just a little smaller, I find that it just holds really well. And then your challah, when it is baking, it bakes up, opposed to when it's in the oven on a cookie sheet, it bakes out and sort of can just lose its shape a bit. But either one is perfectly fine. Like,
it's like a Jewish challah. It needs containment. It needs like the structure in order to have the freedom. Wait, couple quick questions, and you have to go up. How long is the second rise?
So the second rise is just about 15 to 20 minutes. What I typically do at this stage is, again, if you're just tuning in, we've braided, we've egg washed, and we'll sit and let rise 15 to 20 minutes.
And when do seeds, and where do seeds go?
Seeds can go on right before they go into the oven. But what I usually do when I braid is, even before I egg wash, I turn on my oven and I preset it to 350. And then usually by the time it gets to 350, it's around the same 15 to 20 minutes. And it's ready to go in. Now, if you don't have time because you're in a rush, let's say, if you can't let it rise for 15 to 20 minutes and you let it like just breathe for 5 to 10, I also think that that's okay. But you might find from week to week that you actually see a difference.
So remind us the temperature for how long?
350, and then I put mine in for 30 minutes. I have found 25 minutes sometimes can make them a little doughy, and I happen to really love that consistency, but some people have said like, oh, look, it just felt like a few spots were undercooked, and I was like, ooh, I love that. But that 5-minute difference knocks that out completely. So if you're like me and you like those really doughy water bagels, 25 minutes. And if you like more of a fluffy, cakey consistency, then 30, and you're good.
And gluten-free flour, does that work as well?
It should work as well. I haven't tried gluten-free flour yet, but from what I have heard, gluten-free flour works just fine.
And almond flour? You have so many questions.
Yep. Also almond flour too, I've heard is fine.
And I want to just shout out to Sharon Steinberg. She said, a tip is halfway through baking, egg wash again, as you'll see what you've missed as at the baking. Sharon, maybe you should be joining us. We're so happy to hear from you. Thank you for that little tip.
Awesome.
So now it's in the oven, it's cooking. We've got about just a couple minutes before we close up. I want to say a couple things. Do you have a finished product for us?
I thought I did, but I actually don't. I meant to do that. And I guess last night I was learning how to make babka. So all I have to show you is I made a babka, but
show us the babka. Show us the babka.
I will show you the half-eaten babka. Hold on.
So while she's getting the babka, I want to say to a couple people, first of all, we want to see your finished project. So hashtag AJU together, hashtag AJU together. We'll put it up there. Show us your finished project. Before Shabbat, we want to see your challah. You could take a picture with your challah and you, or you could just take a picture of your challah. We want you to, oh God, the babka looks amazing. And so cute and tiny.
It was only like that big. It was a small babka. I promise it wasn't like this whole like long babka that we ate. But it was a very similar dough and super, super easy. So that's on my Facebook wall also because I took pictures of it last night. And Gila, the one I was chatting about earlier, she was kind enough to share her recipe on my wall. So so it's there, and I will post our finished challah for sure. But thank you so much for having me.
And Jess, I have to tell you, we're going to have someone coming on and baking babka. So if you like baking challah with us, that was a perfect transition. You go to AJU B'Yachad Together, aju.edu to see all our offerings. And we do have lots of things to get your hands in. We're really trying to listen to your audience. So we want you to let us know also what are the Jewish rituals you would like to learn and other things that you'd like to do to get your hands dirty. Monday morning, I will be in conversation with Rabbi Jason Weiner. He is the spiritual leader, modern Orthodox rabbi at Cedar Sinai Medical Center. We're going to be talking about risk and what risks you should be taking as we go back to re-entering into society. And it is a fascinating conversation, I can promise you, because he is a wise, brilliant person. I am so delighted, Jess, that we had this time to bake together. I want everybody to post their challah. I'm going to post mine at hashtag AJU together. I want to thank everybody at Spirited by AJU for the dedication and love they put into every single offering. I especially want to thank you. I want to thank everybody at American Jewish University because we are in this together and we will emerge from it together. Stay well.